My name is Trip Gorman, and in this episode of Semilla.VC, I sit down with Antonio Nunes, founder and CEO of Instaleap, a SaaS platform that powers on-demand logistics for leading grocery retailers. Prior to Instaleap, Antonio was the co-founder of Mercadoni, a one-hour delivery groceries marketplace in Latin America. In this episode of Semilla.VC, we discussed conquering last-mile delivery for logistics startups, the differences between working with customers in Latin America, US, and Europe, all regions that Instaleap covers, and Antonio's time working as a consultant at McKinsey, living in places like Lisbon, New Delhi, Kuala Lumpur, and Luanda. We discussed all this and more in this episode of Semilla.VC. Antonio, could you start by telling the audience a little bit more about your work history up to and including your current role at Instaleap?
So sounds good, Trip. So I'm originally Portuguese. I actually started my work life by starting an NGO, so completely outside normal corporate standards. And back then I was actually interested in working with entrepreneurs, and I thought that working with entrepreneurs was a good way to promote human development. So I looked around at a bunch of NGOs. I didn't find any that actually was tackling the problem the way I thought should be tackled. So I actually started an NGO myself. So I started an NGO, went to Mozambique, got some sponsors, built a team, and that was actually my first startup experience. Was just after graduating. That NGO eventually carried on through time. Now it's operating in 3 different geographies: in Mozambique, in São Tomé, which is a tiny little African country next to Ghana, and in Timor, which is a tiny Asian country next to Indonesia, all of them Portuguese speaking, so it made a lot of sense with the kind of sponsors that I could get, the teams that I could hire. So it was my first actual work experience. After that, eventually I had to make money for myself, so I went back to Europe and I got a job at McKinsey. I worked as a consultant there, so they placed me in projects working with companies in Europe, in India, in Malaysia. So I did that for a while. Great experience, learned a lot about how to structure complex problem-solving sets, how to communicate. And then eventually in 2011, I met a German founder called Oliver Samwer, which is the CEO and founder for Rocket Internet. And these guys, they were a weird mix of an investor / company builder in Europe back in 2011, in a moment where very few people were actually investing in technology in emerging markets. And they had this insight of basically taking successful technology business in the US and trying to replicate them across the world. And I thought the idea was kind of cool, the idea of using technology to develop emerging markets. So I joined this guy first in Singapore, where we started a company called Zalora, which is an online fashion retailer. That company eventually grew to become the category leader in fashion e-commerce. This was back in 2011. So back then there was, e-commerce was very underdeveloped in Southeast Asia. So we got to set it up from scratch. That company became quite successful. And then I really wanted to move to Latin America, and I wanted to live in Latin America for the long run. In general, I love emerging markets because I feel that everything is to be built. So there's a bunch of infrastructure gaps, a bunch of stuff that doesn't work, but at the same time, people have real technology needs, and everything is to be built. So, but at the same time, I wanted something a little bit closer to Europe. So Latin America felt a little bit like that mix between an emerging market, but at the same time, somehow closer to home. And I came to this part of the world, to Bogota, in 2012, where I founded a company called Linio, also with the backing of these Rocket Internet guys, and that was a leading marketplace in South America. A business model similar to eBay, eBay/Amazon. And back in those days, and this was 2012, there was only Mercado Libre, very focused on classifieds, very focused on C2C used stuff. And we wanted to build a big marketplace with amazing customer experience, working directly with brands. We started that company. I was one of the founders, so I was in charge of marketing. I was the CMO. So my job was basically building up the customer acquisition machine across the different countries, which was initially Mexico, then Colombia, Peru, Venezuela, Chile, Argentina, and maybe another small one that I cannot remember. But it was basically figuring out how the hell are we going to sell people stuff over the internet. A lot of them that just got into the internet recently, back in a time where there wasn't a developed e-commerce ecosystem. So it was a lot of fun. Actually, we got to be very cool stuff. Like we were the first big Facebook advertisers in South America. We were the first people in South America using mobile ads for Facebook, for example, and figuring out how to use Meta products to do mobile advertising and get app downloads. We built the first television campaigns for e-commerce in some of the countries in South America, figuring out how to use an offline format such as TV to get people to buy online for the first time. So that was fun. We built up that company. We got it to some 7 different countries, around $300-400 million of GMV. And then we were approached by the largest retail group in Chile, which eventually ended up buying that company. So we sold it. And then we were looking for what do we do next. And we started to become very interested in the grocery space. And mostly because it's a large category where it's something that's very intimate as well, because it's the food that you put on your family's house. It's how you get your house to run with supplies. So it's something that's very recurring as well. So that's very interesting from a business standpoint. And we just knew that the category was different. It needed different technology. And that's how we launched a new company that was called Mercadoni, a grocery delivery marketplace. Eventually that we figured out that the right model wasn't through marketplace, it was something else. And that pivoted into what today is Instaleap. So today I'm the founder and CEO for Instaleap. Instaleap is a SaaS platform that helps retailers across the world operate their e-commerce in a better way. So making it more profitable and with more consistent delivery experience. Very focused on the grocery and pharma side.
Amazing. And so I saw that Instaleap, you operate in Latin America, the US, and Europe. How are the needs of supermarkets in these different regions different? And what are the unique challenges that they each face in these kind of different ecosystems?
It's a great question. And actually, when we started the company, we didn't know which geography would actually be working in. But what we did was we had a network, because I had been living in this part of the world for a while, working with supermarkets here. So we closed some of the largest here. We closed HEB, for example, which is it's a large Texas supermarket with a big operation in Mexico. That was actually our first client. Fantastic retailer. And project went well. We were super happy. Then came a Chilean retailer that looked for us, and we figured out, okay, it looks like we have a market. And by the way, they need exactly the same stuff. Then we got a Peruvian one. Then we got a Colombian one. And when we realized pretty much in most of Spanish Latam countries, up from Mexico down to Chile, were working with us. 2 years ago, we looked at Brazil and we saw, oh, this is massive. We need to do this. By the way, I'm Portuguese, so I could speak the language, and it's fairly easy for me to get into what Brazil should mean. So we launched Brazil, and that went pretty well. And then we actually got pulled by a European retailer in Portugal, that from people that knew me and said, hey, it's super interesting what you guys are doing. It looks like the kinds of stuff that you solve, we have the same challenges. Should we have a chat? So we had a chat, and then we closed the contract with the largest retail company in Portugal. And this was our first European client. Now we have operations in some 6-7 European countries, in Austria, Poland, Italy, Spain, Portugal. In May, we actually started operating our first store in Africa, in Kenya, which was also a bit unexpected. But ultimately, what we've been seeing is that most retailers around the world have the same challenges. It's about how can they create very efficient operations where the same manpower hour can deliver as many throughput as possible without mistakes and in a very accurate way. And the challenges are very, very similar. It's just that certain markets have different maturity stages. So for example, we have clients that are very mature in places like Austria, and even in another country in South America, where they actually have picking robots. So they don't use humans to fulfill the items, they use machines to do it. Our software enables that, but that's a very advanced stage. And then there's other cases where you just have simple stores, very simple operation, like the one in Kenya, for example. But ultimately, we see success of very advanced markets with this exactly the same need all over the world.
Amazing. And so could you tell a little bit more about, okay, I am a retailer and I call Instaleap proverbially, and I want to use your services. What do they get? Because you gave me the one sentence before, but what does that really mean for the retailer?
Yeah. Putting it very simple is, think of it as a Instacart software, whatever they have in the backend, in a box offered under a SaaS business model to a retailer. The main reason why a retailer will typically want to work with us is because you're frustrated that you've been working with marketplaces that take a huge commission, that start controlling your client and your data, and you want to take control of your e-commerce channel. So you've probably been seeing as a retailer sales growing up in the e-commerce channel over the past coming years. That has been driven by a massive digitalization of commerce, specifically in the groceries and pharma category. And you want to take control of the client relationship, the data, and you want to pay less commission. So that's typically the status quo. At the same time, doing e-commerce for retailers and for grocers is very challenging. So you have complexity in the operation coming from, you have fresh items, you have frozen items, you have weightable stuff. So you have a banana and that needs to be weighed at some point. You have complex promotions. So it's a hard world in terms of operations that needs to be enabled, that you want it to be flawless. You want it to be delivered on time without mistakes. And at the same time, you don't have unlimited people to execute this, right? Because you have a limited amount of margin. So you want to make sure that whoever people are working on your e-commerce operation, they are extremely efficient, and that you're not wasting anybody's time, because that means that ultimately your e-commerce can become unprofitable. So this is the set of problems that we solve, and the set of problems that retailers have before they get to work with us. Now, on a more specific level, how does actually the product work? So there's two ways in which a retailer can work with us. One is, let's say you have your own app, your own e-commerce, and you want to solve everything that happens afterwards. Just plug into an API, and then our product will take care of it. What is taking care of it? We'll make sure that you're promising the right delivery time to your customer. So maybe sometimes it's in 30 minutes, maybe it's at 7 p.m. That'll be contextual to the order and to what's going on in your own operation in real time for every single user that gets into the checkout. We'll make sure we orchestrate the tasks that need to happen. So we'll make sure that you do your picking, that we optimize the picking routes, that we allocate it to the right store or dark store. We'll make sure that the right driver will get to do it. So whether it's a truck with routing or whether it's a very express fast delivery or an external delivery fleet, we'll make sure that those tasks get allocated. And if anything goes wrong along the process, we have software that helps correct back to the optimal stage, and we inform back to the end user. So this is in a long form, in a short form, sort of what our product does.
Amazing. And could you tell a little bit more about the last mile component? Because I saw you guys you help the clients deliver world-class last mile experiences. What are the issues with last mile, and how do you guys, you kind of mentioned a little bit, how do you guys solve them?
So we tend to have a view on last mile, that last mile starts at the checkout, when you deliver, how fast you can get something. The second part of it is the fulfillment or picking, and the third part is the actual transportation or the delivery side. We help all across this chain. On the delivery side, there's different ways in which you can do that. So it can happen with your own delivery trucks, your own delivery operators that work for you, or a transportation company in your region that is providing the stuff. You give them our app that allows them to actually run their tasks, be it on the delivery side or on the picking side. Another alternative that we actually help on the delivery side is, sometimes companies want to work with DoorDash or Uber Direct or whatever delivery provider is available in your own city or state. So we allow them all to be plugged into Instaleap. And in those cases, one of the biggest challenges that we're solving is the complexity, is the fact that you have hundreds of stores, hundreds of delivery resources. Some are in-house, some are an offline guy, some are a DoorDash that you're delegating a task to. And all of it compounds to a significant amount of complexity that you still want to make sure you distill it into a low cost of operation and very good customer experience. And that's ultimately our job.
And so what sort of advice do you have to other founders who want to, work with logistics companies that's what they want to build, or they want to kind of have their SaaS product be intertwined with a very maybe unsophisticated brick and mortar retailer, like what maybe a small supermarket chain would be?
I think there's maybe two pieces of advice. They're probably not fully encompassing, but there's two things that have really worked out for me in trying to work in this space. One is have a very clear vision of how it should look like. Don't let yourself be dragged into what one retailer or one big company says it's the way they want to run something. If you run that way and you're on the enterprise business and you're working with retailers, you're going to be dragged down into, in my opinion, nowhere. You need to have your own view of how should the process work? How should logistics work at scale for the category you're operating in? So that's been something that has been very, very important for us. And then sticking to that vision. And then some retailers, maybe they don't buy your vision and they want something completely different. But you cannot be swinging between different visions. You need to have your own vision, iterate and learn on it, but stick to the vision before just going after specific projects with specific retailers. The second thing that I would say is try to be smart about choosing some problems, even if they're small or they're a subset of the whole big vision, and really nail them to the end. I think these are two things that I think we've done pretty well, and I would highly advise other people to maybe try and see if it works for them.
And so you lived in San Francisco at some point. I'm from San Francisco, so I want to know, what are your thoughts on San Francisco? And then you've spent time in all these different places. You spent time in Lisbon, New Delhi, Kuala Lumpur, Luanda. I mean, I don't think anybody has had this sort of global experience that you have. So tell us a little bit more about that. Tell us a little bit more about San Francisco, where are you right now?
Yeah. No, I lived in San Francisco for 2 years pretty much until COVID hit. I loved it. I think it's an amazing city, amazing ecosystem. It reminds me actually a lot. I was born in Lisbon and my family's Portuguese. So there's the best part of Lisbon is San Francisco reminds me a lot of it. The sun, the even like
the bridge,
the bridge, exactly, the bridge. So it reminds me a lot of it about it. Kind of there's a bit of a Mediterranean somehow vibe that it feels exactly the same. But I mean, obviously the ecosystem is fantastic. I mean, there's a lot of people that are doing very good stuff. They're operating at a very high standard, and I think it's very inspirational to be in San Francisco. For sure, like you've heard this a million times. The flip side is sometimes it feels a bit self-centered, and we're all kind of in the same mindset and thinking the same ways. And it helps to sometimes get out and figure out that, well, we have our, we're in San Francisco, people are operating at a very high standard, but there's amazing people doing great stuff out there as well. There's other realities of the world that have big problems that can be solved with technology as well. And jumping a bit out of the bubble sometimes helps a lot, staying grounded.
Amazing. And so then I want to hear more about your time at McKinsey, living in Lisbon, New Delhi, Kuala Lumpur, and Luanda, because I quite the group there.
Yeah, I mean, so my story with McKinsey was when I graduated, and after I was doing the NGO, I wanted a moment in my career where I could learn from people that knew a bunch of skill set that I thought was interesting. And back then, a lot of people were working either for consulting companies or for investment banks. I think things changed a lot since then. But back then, those were kind of seen as the best schools for you to get a foundation out of which you could decide to go afterwards. So that was the main reason. It was a great experience. Learned a lot. I did it in Lisbon. I did it in Delhi, in Kuala Lumpur. Um, and all the projects were very different. The cultures were also very different between all of them. Um, Learned a lot about communication. Learned a lot about problem solving. I think ultimately, I think it was a very good part of my career as well.
Amazing. And so you mentioned Mercadoni. Tell us the whole story there and how that kind of played into Instaleap.
Yeah, so actually Mercadoni is what I would say is what was the embryo of what today is Instaleap and is what allowed us to learn about the category. Um, it was born out of trying to crack the groceries category, and our first approach was basically seeing grocers need help in going online, and our approach was, yeah, let's just launch a grocery delivery marketplace. We get a bunch of different stores, we put them in an app, you get into the app, you choose the products that you want, and you get them in your house in 1 hour. That is a business model that is extremely challenging as a business model to scale because you need a lot of cash. It's very cash intensive in terms of customer acquisition, in terms of subsidization of logistics costs while you're subscale. So it's challenging to grow in that market, but at the same time, it was what allowed us to deeply learn about the category. The reason why today we're able to build software on a SaaS business model for retailers, and I think we're quite successful at it, is because at some point we had to get the stuff delivered ourselves. We had to crack, how do I build an app where I don't have any assets, I don't have anything, I just have a space to have technology. That technology needs to sell, and it needs to provide the infrastructure for fulfillment, delivery, etc. And by learning what was actually required, that created a knowledge of the problem and allowed us to create the same vision that I told you a while back on what's our vision for what great grocery delivery looks like. That then we made it into a SaaS business model. Eventually, it pivoted, but I feel we're super thankful for having had the chance to actually operate it first, learn what it should look like, and then change business model.
And I want to ask a very broad question now, and I'm excited to see where you take this. And it doesn't have to be career related at all. What are you most excited about right now?
Great question. I'm very excited. One of the things that we're very excited internally is we ultimately believe that the grocery retail category, which is the first one we worked on, being something so big is going to be very changed by technology. There's different types of products with different applications that can be done. I mean, obviously, the very obvious one, AI applications, the one that everybody's talking about. There's more than the high level concept. I like the applications of what you can do with it. Our business, because it's a very operations intensive, it's about how you adjust multiple tasks happening at the same time between multiple people at the same time. There's a lot of AI that can be deployed into what we're doing. So that's one area where we're very focused on figuring out where are the specific applications where we can get most value out of the technology at the moment.
Okay, so finally, I have to ask Peter Thiel's famous contrarian question with uniquely Semilla.VC twist. What important truth about Latin America do very few people agree with you on?
It's good question. Look, I don't know how contrarian it is, but there's one thing I believe a lot, which is there's, even in markets where fundamentally a lot of the infrastructure still doesn't exist, even where a lot of things are broken in to be built, technology can have a disproportionate effect in people's lives and in business. So I believe this very deeply. There's people that a lot in the market think, no, technology is a first world problem. It comes much later on. There's so many things that can just be built with more rudimentary solutions. I don't necessarily believe that. I think that you can deploy technology in emerging markets in Latin America and have tremendous business outcomes to leap forwards in operations and in anything that you're doing.
Amazing. Okay. Well, Antonio, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the Semilla.VC podcast today. I very much appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Trip.
Thank you for watching this episode of Semilla.VC. Make sure to like and subscribe wherever you view the podcast. Follow me on Twitter @GormanTrip. And be sure to check out our newsletter, Dealflow LA, which can be found by going to dealflow.la.